Hello everyone, this is Fernando for Godzilla Movie News. For this latest video, I'd like to continue the theme that I had for my last video, and this is with regards to talking about Godzilla projects that could have been. Last time we were talking about the Jon de Bont version from the early 90s. This time I'd like to discuss about the sequel to the Godzilla 1998 film. This one being the Dean Devlin, Roland Emmerich film that was in 1998, and this was going to be a direct sequel to it. So for starters, I'd like to mention that there's really not much official information on the sequel to track. The farthest it ever got, movie-wise, was a story treatment. Story treatment is essentially like the very earliest stage of a movie. It's the pitch that the writers come up with. No dialogue, nothing at all in terms of actual shooting scenes. All they are ideas that are pitched to a producer of sorts, and then the producer gets them sold to the studios, and then the studios get the script started and so forth. So all we have based on the sequel is just the story treatment that I was able to find, and so we're going to use that for the analyzation of this video. Essentially, the way the story treatment goes, the Godzilla sequel was going to start directly after the end of the first movie, literally that same night or maybe the day after. And this is, Godzilla is dead, his body is being carved up from the bridge and being dissected in some warehouse, and it's being done by a group of scientists that Nick is a part of. He, of course, is not too happy on that, because to him this was a whole new species of sorts, and now it's dead, and he still hopes that there's some kind of remnants of maybe some baby Godzillas out there. He believes it, and the Army believes it too, because they want to make 100% certain that everybody of that species is dead. They don't want anything involving a world overrun by Godzillas. So Nick goes back in search of the Zillas, and he happens to find one. Actually, it's that missing one that we saw at the very end of the first movie. And when Nick finds it, it's pretty much on its deathbed, because this poor baby Zilla is so weak. There's no fish for it to eat, nothing at all, and it's been without any kind of mother or anything like that for quite a while now. So Nick saves it, and right before the Army finds it, Nick is able to hide it, feed it, and then release it. So that way he can ensure that at least there's some part of this species to him that's still going to survive. And what he didn't know, though, was, and according to the story treatment, this baby Zilla would think of him as his mother. And later on that would play an important part. So the story treatment next goes, flash forward about 2 years later, and Nick is going to get married. Audrey is in the film. Audrey is, of course, the news reporter from the first movie, so she comes back for this scene. And they're going to get married. And after the marriage, he hops into his waiting limo for his bride, and all of a sudden the limo shuts closed, the doors all close all of a sudden, and it speeds off, and it turns out it's Philippe Roche from the first movie, the Jean Reno character. So he's there, he's telling Nick that there's a whole bunch of strange events happening once again. People are missing, places are being attacked, and he thinks that there's Godzillas out there. He's also, at this point, a little suspicious of Nick, because he realizes that as a scientist, Nick has some kind of fond memories of Godzilla, essentially as a species, and he wants to make certain to Nick that this time they're going to finish it, and finish it for real. They're not going to let any Godzillas live, because they want to make certain that there's no kind of jeopardy to any future people or civilization on Earth. So Nick decides to join him once again, and as far as I could tell from this treatment, that was the last we heard of Audrey at that point, because she was left at the wedding altar all of a sudden when Philippe drove off with Nick in that limo. So the hunt begins, and they surmise that based on geographic locations and how long it's been since this newest presumed Godzilla has been undetected, that the closest location they could think of is Australia. It's essentially a giant island surrounded by water, which is again mimicking the same design that the original Godzilla went for with New York. And they realized that this could be the only place that this Godzilla could be at, and so they start to hunt there. At this point, I believe the Army joins in on the hunt as well, because they too have been tracking the destruction and the people being missing from locations, and they want to make certain that Godzilla is destroyed. I believe the original captain or General Hicks, that angry general from the original movie, is back at this point too, and he's making it a mission on his end to finish this once and for all too. Joining the act is a new character, somebody, I believe, a scientist of some sort. Her name is Anna, and she too has been cataloging these disappearances and destructions, and she believes it has to do with something, but I believe she's not aware that it has to do with Godzilla. And she runs into the path that Philip and Nick are chasing, and the three of them get together, and Anna turns out to be, I believe, some kind of love interest of sorts. And when that happens, then Audrey, I don't think she's going to come back at that point, because there was going to be a whole new direction going with Anna in this case as a love interest. But in any case, all three of them find the Godzilla's nest, and when they do, they find a whole bunch of baby Zillas there as well. So there is a Godzilla somewhere around there, and it's having babies all over again. And at this point, Philip is devastated. He has to do something about this, and that's when the Godzilla, the full-grown Godzilla, makes its appearance in the movie. He's about to attack and kill all three of them, because the baby Zillas are all running scared, and he's just trying to protect them. And according to the story, Jim, this is when it gets pretty good. He's about to stomp on Nick personally and kill him, but then suddenly realizes who he was, and it's the same baby Zilla that Nick rescued from the very beginning of the movie. Apparently, when Nick took care of that baby Zilla for that time, Nick became like a surrogate mother of sorts, and this image of Nick being his mother was imprinted on him this whole time. And when he realized who he was, this prevented the now full-grown Godzilla from attacking Nick, and there was supposed to be some warm scene of the Godzilla kneeling down and trying to nudge against Nick, and then that way Nick realizes, okay, we have a friend here, and there's something that he wants to continue with Godzilla. And now at this point, the Army realizes where Godzilla is, and they fire a whole bunch of missiles of some sort into that same area. Whether or not Nick is there and Philip, and they know that it's happening, I don't know. But it kills almost all the Godzillas, all the little baby ones as well. So it's reminiscent of the ending of the first movie, when the Army shoots down Madison Square Garden, and all the Godzillas are killed. Except it was at this point that the true monster, is revealed. And it turns out that it's a mutated insectoid of some sorts. The treatment didn't really get into the description of what kind of insectoid it was, so I just took deliberated this picture from the Godzilla, the animated series, to try to best convey it. I kept thinking that it was probably going to be some bee or some kind of wasp of some sort, so we'll just have to use this as a reference point from here on out. And yeah, unfortunately, there's no official confirmation or any kind of conceptual designs on this part, so we'll just have to go with this information that's here. And it turns out that this monster, and this is a giant monster that has thousands and thousands of little wasp monsters or little bee monsters that look exactly like it, that are its little minions. They're the ones that are doing all this destruction and this damage. Godzilla, the original full-grown Godzilla, survives the assault from the military and attacks the winged monster and destroys him. And that's where technically the movie ends. The Army is about to once again attack Godzilla at this point to make sure that things get finished, but Nick is able to convince them not to do it, and it turns out that actually one of the Zillas survived from the original assault. So now the full-grown Godzilla and the little baby Zilla go off into the sunset, and the movie ends at that point. So as you can see, the Godzilla sequel was supposed to involve a lot of the main characters from the first movie. It was going to get rid of Audrey, which, for better or for worse, at least would have gone in a different direction. And it was going to introduce a whole new character named Anna, who was supposed to be the love interest. I believe at the end of this treatment, she eventually skills with Nick, and they began a relationship of sorts. They were going to continue the same use of the Godzilla design, so there wasn't going to be any further mutation to move Godzilla from the lizard type design it was in the first movie to the design that we know of now. So that would have been something, as far as a rumor, that would have been squashed at that point. And then the introduction of that bee/wasp-like creature would have involved monster versus monster fight that the fans would have been clamoring of, and it would have culminated with Godzilla becoming the good guy, unlike the villain that he or she was in the first movie. What killed the sequel was the fact that the first Godzilla movie, the Godzilla 1998 version, while making close to $400 million overseas, and this is like a worldwide total, let alone the DVDs and all the merchandising, Columbia Studios thought that it just wasn't enough. There wasn't going to be enough reward considering the risk involved with the newest budget. And sure enough, I had read somewhere that the budget on this one was going to be even more than the original, and the studio wanted less than the original because they didn't want to. They wanted to make sure that they were hedging their bets on this one. The director, Roland Emmerich, wanted more budget. The studio told him no, and so he left at that point. And the Columbia Studios overall, their contract to make the Godzilla sequel was a 5-year term, and it would have lapsed in May 2003. May 2003 came and went. They didn't make the sequel, even with a different design or a different direction of writers and producers and so forth, and that was it. So, sure enough, the sequel was never made afterward, which led to this 12 or 13-year gap, and we're finally getting now another sequel of sorts to see what the new direction is with Gareth Edwards and so forth. So yeah, that's the latest video here for the Godzilla that could have been, in this case the sequel to the 1998 version. I'll follow up with more news with other movies in the future as well. Thank you very much.